Started for our last session out here. If we could have you all join us back, we would appreciate it. You ready, Kofi? All right, y'all, we're gonna get started with this last session over here. I'm Jasika, for those that haven't met me. I wanna introduce Kofi to you all today. So oddly enough, I think I originally met Kofi because he was supposed to speak at TitleConf, back in 2020, which is another event that one of my friends was hosting, and then we somehow got connected over that and through live streaming and things like that. I thought he would be interesting to come and chat with us today because he does some very non-traditional things in code and makes money from doing those non-traditional things in code. So, we're always about kind of thinking about what are the opportunities that we just really don't know about, or we might not even know this avenue exists, but as soon as we find out, we're like, oh, that's what I've always been looking for. So I hope that you all will enjoy what he has for us today, and I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I drove in from Montreal. That's like 9 hours away, and je suis parle français. I just said I spoke French because that's what the Montreal thing is. And now I'm going to show how I do code, but I think first I should bring you in my realm. So I'm going to ask 3 questions about you that you won't be able to answer right away, but that's okay, that's the whole point. So right now I need you to think. Your 5th favorite color, not first, not second, not third, not fourth, 5th favorite color, and your 7th favorite meal. So that's your 5th favorite color, and your 7th, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7 favorite meals. So yeah, give you time some to think. Yeah. I know. 5th, 5 and 7. And I know it's a tough question, and you're probably also wondering, what does this have anything to do with code? But think about it in this way. What algorithm are you using to get that? Some of y'all are probably thinking, they're going brute force about this is my first favorite, this is my second favorite. And the meal, we just had good food. So you're probably thinking, what was your 7th favorite meal of all that food? All of that was good. And I'm from my ethnicity is Ghana, so that jollof was actually good jollof. Probably Ghanaian and not Nigerian. But there's any Nigerians here, my bad. That's a little jab. So I'm going to give you some time to think about it. So that's your 5th favorite color, 7th favorite meal. Has anyone come up with anything yet? You mind sharing?
Yellow spaghetti.
Yellow spaghetti, okay. I was thinking mom spaghetti, but I'm like, how stereotypical of where I am. Y'all probably heard that so many times, so my bad. You?
It's green and mac and cheese.
Okay. Yeah.
Fifth favorite. Probably purple. Yeah. And then veal, spaghetti, probably I don't know.
Okay. You got something?
Blue and shrimp fried rice.
Okay, blue. Okay, so now what I need you to do is combine the 2 together. So your blue shrimp fried rice, your yellow spaghetti, your purple. And now think about how that would move. Think about how it tastes. Think about how it feels. And the reason why I always do this icebreaker, first of all, it takes a lot of time, people think, but also now realize that you know yourself best, but you are not able to think of a solution right away. And this is one way that I think that we discard with code is that, code gives you all this magical powers, but if you don't know how to solve, or rather what to solve, you can be in this infinite loop. So, and that's where my journey always takes me, because I like to ask myself the random question, like, not what code can do, but what it can't do, and let me do the opposite. And this has brought me on to many places all over the world. So starting in 2019 and also 2021, I had a goal that I wanted to have my code featured at least once on every continent, and I did achieve that multiple times. I have traveled to multiple countries like Canada, in Canada, other parts of Canada, in the States, Virginia, Texas, New York, Colorado. Didn't go to San Fran, but had some work distributed in San Fran, Pasadena for a festival, Netherlands, France. And then you're probably like, oh, that's cool, you get to travel to Code. And also won some awards doing a big projection mapping. And if you don't know what projection mapping, you see like these buildings, so you would do like code that like, okay, if there's windows, certain things will come up, and they want a sustainable media architecture award. And then you're probably going to ask, when I tell people this, they're like, okay, so you do animation. I'm like, no, it had data science. They're like, okay, you code music. Oh, JavaScript, oh, you play music. I'm like, no, I just learned music through code. I just learned animation through code. And then you gave me a look on like, how's music code, right? If you look at music, it's all rhythms, right? 100 beats per minute is a scale. A pitch is a scale, right? So, boom, beat, that's different pitches. So let's say I wanted to do a thing that like the averages of everyone's voice. There, I just made a new instrument. And it seems that there's a lot of people that when they do a lot of different activities or do a little thing, they need that thing to engage their audience, especially post-COVID. Because post-COVID, everyone is on their screen. People don't like to come in person. So there's a lot of people who are like, how do we get people intrigued? And that's where I come in. I'm like, you need something random with code? I can do it. But let's go back, because this. It also started, all of this started out of pettiness, because I actually hated computer science, because I will never forget what happened. I will never forget. It was like the second class of programming, and it's like, if you ever did it, you have to put a phone number. I looked online, Java has a library called isDigit, and if there's not a digit, it returns false. So I'm like, okay, isDigit, boom. Teacher's like, no, you can't do that, because it's not part of the project. And I'm like, but it's in the library. I did not make this up. It is code. Yeah. And then all of that stuff, like it kept like stifling my creativity. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna use random stuff in code to prove that I'm right. And then little did I know that it's gonna let me go on. And then another thing, I had a opportunity to, in 2018, to do something with Google and Chance the Rapper, but I did not get selected. And I think it's because at the time, since I was Canadian, they didn't want to fly me out, so like get someone local. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm not getting in gigs because I'm not a big enough name. You're on my petty list. So now sooner or later, when you guys need me, I'm gonna decide. So through all of this, I'm like, okay, what's the best way to code? What's the best way? I'm like, I could do what everyone else is doing, build traditional apps, like use JavaScript and all that, but I'm like, let me try to do things the Kofi way. And the Kofi way is do something that no one has heard of, but know a bit of, so it makes sense. So I found out that like people were performing with code. And I'm like, okay, performing with code is cool, real time. So if I do something in real time, if it's good, I get to save it. So that saves me time, gets money in my pocket, and then I could just repeat it. So, and then it turns out there's a lot of people that do that. So the environments, because I know it always comes up, this could be done in Ruby, JavaScript, Python, Haskell. And then I luckily met a lot of people that make their own languages. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel, they already did. So I take their wheel and try to find ways to break them and tell them that it's broken and then reuse it. And a lot of this is just to show that coding is magical, but not in the sense of being a superpower, but if you watch like a lot of anime and a lot of like fantasy shows, magic is always done by like incantations and all that, right? So sometimes the most powerful person is not the one that has the most power, it's how fast can you do the spell. But if you look at the construction of magic, it's always, oh, how you do combinations. Like you always hear a character like, oh wow, how are you able to combine those spells? And I think sometimes we get too focused on like, I have to do a full stack, I have to learn the newest JavaScript library. Like I think now there's Bun.js, I don't even know. And like I remember a streamer made a joke the other time like, we have the new dependencies to just tell you need new dependencies when you could have just used the old dependencies to tell you the same thing. So you're really just in this loop of, I'm just getting new tools to do what the old tools done. So So when you think about it creatively, and when you go to a lot of clients don't care what you use. And if they do care what they use, then sometimes it's because they've been lied to, and I'm going to use that word lied to because there's always that one person like, oh, if you don't use Python, Python is faster than JavaScript, JavaScript is faster than Go, but it also depends on what you're doing. So with this approach is, if I can find the fastest, most efficient way to solve a problem, then that's the solution for me. It's not about trying to like, Brennan, if you ever took like a computer science data structure algorithm, there's like longest, subsequence, common, you don't need to know that. Like your client won't know that, you won't know that, you're just wasting your time, I think. But there's nothing wrong with LeetCode, so if you guys use LeetCode, go ahead, use it. That's on you. I won't really use it at the moment because it's not needed all the time, but it's like that. So, where else can I go with this? I know, it's true though. Like, sometimes we think too much, and like, I literally been in like a room with like wildlife coding, and if you want, I can show you like after this talk, where I will literally type line, and the most impressive thing most of the time that people find impressive is not the algorithm. It's like, oh, you can write one line of code, and it has a sound. Then they're like, how did you make that sound? Or you write another one, oh wow, I can see my face. How did you do that so quick? And we have people talking about it before, like that mode of wonder. And I think Madala, right? That's how you say your name? Madala, my bad. And you were saying things about mobility not being the only thing. And that's the thing, because in like my city, everyone talks about AI, video games, robotics. But what about data science? What about like, for us, talking about cars would make sense because we have horrible winters and we have potholes the size of craters. So for us, there should be people talking about cars. While like every time I come to Detroit, like when we're talking about air pollution, that should be a thing that like go over there. But since we don't have people exploring these topics, then no one believes they're real. But once you plant that seed, that goes in. Like the moment, like someone snickered before when I said code music, but once I explained, you're like, okay, it makes sense. I see the correlation. I just open a pathway that you probably wouldn't have had if not for that exposure. And that's also why I like talking about this stuff, because like a lot of my clients are not like businesses. Sometimes they're just festivals or a nonprofit organization that has a data set, and all they want is how do we engage people to keep coming to us. So they're not looking for the most grandiose solution. All they want is something that works for their community to bring them back year after year. And there's a lot of festivals around, and people overlook them. So if you're trying to like build up your clientele, you don't always have to look for those big business, nonprofits or some. There's always a festival, always a conference. Like even a school talent show, you can use like Twilio or like a little like Vue.js and build a thing that like, next up, this person, have a little bio. Might not give you like the $5,000, $50,000 thing, but at least you have a product and project that works. Or earlier I was telling someone like one of my first data science sonifications was just showing people the difference between how a heartbeat sounds for different races, but based on their chances of having high cholesterol. So some like places would have a 56% chance of cholesterol, some would have 44. If I showed you a graph 56%, 44, it wouldn't hit. But I had them like literally going boom, psh, boom, psh. And people are like, oh wow, this is actually the most terrifying thing I heard. Because like every time I would do it, then like the average, like let's say 1 in 4 people will get like a heart attack or not. On the 4th beat, like with a randomizer, you would hear like, like all this stuff. And you would hear me in the background be like, now someone just had this. That is more effective than any graph. And I know all of you seen it on the news. Oh, this graph, like, oh, this much people get sick. But now since I gave a sound, you also see it, but now you hear it. And since I'm doing it that mimics a heartbeat, now you're only forced to be like, oh damn, this is actually a serious thing. And I didn't have to, once again, implement the most complicated thing. I just did it in a way that, what is the most effective way for someone to, well, in that case, you're not enjoying this experience because I'm actually trying to scare you. So how do I scare you in the most efficient way to make it work?
And like, yeah, so you have the horror, but it's not only horror. Like people want to laugh. Sometimes it's just a light mood. So those are the different things. And if you have questions, you can ask. I know it's pretty fast, but if you have anything, I could explain what I do or how I do it. I know it's the end of the day, so I thought it would be good for a light note.
Yeah, I'm curious about that making money part.
Yeah, good. Good that we're going to that straight. So the thing is that a lot of festivals have budgets and a lot of nonprofits have budgets, and they always have calls. So in the States, there's like organizations like the National Science Foundation, NSF, but there's always art calls and code calls. The thing about art calls is that most people don't realize that code is art, because sometimes they're not really looking for art. What they're looking for is somewhere to engage. So if you did make them a website or make them an app, that still fits their goal. So it actually started, like the first time I got paid for one of these type of things was 2015. They just needed a random workshop. I'm like, I can do creative coding. Went in, kids liked the animation. So I'm like, okay, cool, build up. Next year did it. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe there's something there. And then I realized, I'm like, okay, Montreal, big enough city, they might have a lot of people. So then I'm like, you know what, let me go like, I have a car, right? So let me go 1 hour beyond. So I looked at this city, Sherbrooke, and they were looking for someone to perform or like this. I'm like, you know what? I see that you have a STEM program. I can code music. They're like, wait, you can do what? And then I had to do 2 Zoom calls because they're like, we read your application, but you're saying you can do this live with code, but we never seen that before. And this is like the beauty of like having like Zoom. It's like, I'm like, okay. No, was this Zoom? No, it was Skype. Because Zoom only blew up 2020. So this is Skype with the little annoying ring. So go on, share screen, type someone. They're like, oh wow, you can do that real time. So, build up my confidence. Then I started getting travel grants. Like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go to this place. I'm gonna explore this stuff. Like that one, I wish I can like be like this is secret sauce, but really all I did was be myself, wrote what I was gonna do, and just tell them that like, I don't think a lot of people are doing this, it's gonna help the communities that I'm involved, and bam. And due to that, and that one was where like giving back really counts, because the only reason why I wrote that grant, honestly, was like for the grant money, of course, but it was also to give back to like Ghana, because my parents are from Ghana, and what I really wanted to do was just give back to those kids, because I'm like, they skipped a generation there, so a lot of them did not have desktops, but they do have laptops and smartphones. And since I use a lot of open source tools, I'm like, you know what, if I go there and show at least one person how to code, it's gonna make me, and I wrote that in the grant, on and on. And then it started getting real. I'm like, okay, a lot of traction. You know what? At the moment, I ain't working anywhere. Let me go more in, right? Just finish school, all that stuff. And then I realized there's bigger grants. And this is where it goes from like, okay, I'm just being a solo developer, but now I have to sort of think of business. Because when you get those bigger grants, as many people mentioned throughout the day, you're not a solo person anymore. You need a team. And building a team was like one of the things. But like, then again, a lot of people don't know, like telling you guys, they're like, oh wow, I haven't seen that. So imagine people next to me who don't know tech, they're like, wow, we don't know. So one of the things I had to do was build them up and be like, no guys, look, you're a good writer. If you write in this language, all you have to do is write poetry and it's going to do the code for you. So I had to start doing a side business to start getting those bigger grants of teaching the people around me how they can use code to go in. So it works in this circle where I was able to start getting more gigs because I was willing to help other people. And then every time I was explaining how to do it and all that, I was getting better. And then that's another secret of if you're trying to do grants or applying to things, anything you do that's publishable, you gotta make sure, because you are your biggest advocate. You are the one that's gonna speak the most. Like if you do stuff in silent, there is no one that's necessarily gonna be louder than you are. So I made sure that some of the stuff was published in some publications, did get interviews, because it seems we have this thing where we like it when people say they travel or get in the news. So telling someone that like, you were in a journal in Detroit, someone might go, man, but if you tell them that I was in a journal in like the Philippines, they interviewed me, people are gonna be like, oh wow. And you probably did half of the work that you would have had to do to get in a journal year. But that international appeal sort of like rotates itself. And there is scientific proof of this where they found that one of the ways to grow is to get like people to realize that like you're being noticed elsewhere. So the more you get noticed outside of your area, then when you come back in your area, you look like a big star, but you don't even have to be that big. It's just that you just went somewhere else. And that's one way to like make the money, is that your skill set is not limited to that output. That's why like code, like I said, you can do installations, you can do education, you can do music. We're actually writing almost the same exact line of code, just with like some tweaks of outline. And also, to go back to like, how do you make money efficiently to this? I think it's that you have to realize that you don't have to do everything by yourself, but you don't have to master something. If you can put out an MVP or you can put out something that is interesting to you, there's someone else that is interested as well. And you don't have to go, like I said, like I started just doing like some local open mics or some little high school, like, oh, we need someone to speak about tech. And I'm like, I'm going in. And then once I build the resume, people will look at it and be like, oh wow, you got some big names on there. You did that with who? You did who with what? And then it just keeps going and going and going. So I hope that answered it in such a roundabout way. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have you've had installations all over the country and all over the world. Do you have have you had installations in like museums? I've seen like some digital stuff in museums lately.
Yes. In 2018, before the current AI craze, there was a lot of grants that were focusing on AI. So I was on a team that one of the things that we had to do was build curriculum and AI exhibitions for museums and libraries. Because libraries and museums always have a budget. So they might not have the biggest funding, but they always have a budget. And one thing that they won't tell you is that they have to spend that budget. So if there's like $5,000 or $10,000 left over, if they don't use that, that money's gone the next year. Because you know, when government realize you don't use the money, they're going to try to take it back and then add more tax, so you have to pay them more. How they are, try to steal your money after you work hard. But all jokes aside, museums and libraries are always good places because they always have the mission of helping the community, but helping the community is also helping you grow. Like all libraries and museums need to have exhibitions in their mandate. They have to do workshops. People actually have to go there. So that's why like building experiences for museums and libraries is a good way. Like we don't think of them as traditional clients, but they are clients that like technically would always be there because they are like the foundational block of a community, right? They're the third space, fourth space. So by going through there, you can build up a CV. And what's cool about working with them is that in the eyes of other people that are funding, this looks more secure than being like, I gave random Joe this much money to work on that. Like you're actually working with proven entities. So even if they cannot pay you the most, on like if you put that on your CV, it is actually like credible, right? Because you know they have to publicly list that. Some of them have to be like, yeah, we gave money to so and so for this and that. So it is your first deal, and then through that you can work through making contracts. Because whenever you give people contracts, you always look professional. So by working with that, you are working out the kinks of contracts. You are working out the kinks of agreement. And so once again, it's non-traditional client. But since most libraries and museums have been there for over 50 or 60 years, even though they're not traditional in tech, in the world of money, they are still like entities that are still proven that if you have worked with, they still count.
How involved in that, like, individually write grants?
Yeah, so for me, I individually write my grants because even if they fail, I know my idea is still great. Like, I believe in like 95% of my ideas. So I recycle my ideas. But it sounds funny, but like one of the, like I remember there was this one thing where when I started out, it actually got 10 rejections for like smaller one. And then there was a big grant out, you know, and I'm like, I think this idea is still good. And then sometimes I have like, I'm like, which one of my rejected grants do I want to like spread out? Like, so sometimes I will roll the dice, but I'm like, this one seemed good, let me go in, let me tweak it. And since it was probably like, what, like I said, 10 rejections, so this is like the 11, 12th iteration, because I actually gave it 2 other times, because I'm like, hey, if I believe in it, I still got it. And then it finally got in that one. I'm like, okay, and that's like really about the grant process, is that it's actually meant to have a failure rate. Because I remember talking to a grant lady for some grants. There are certain grants, you only have a 12% chance of getting it. So a lot of the times it's not you, it's them, or they have mandates. So you have to look at also who's applying. And another thing about grants is always ask for the limit, because some people try to be timid. Like if it's a $50,000 grant and you really believe in your idea, put that for $50,000, because you cannot let them have any doubt that you have doubt. So you have to like be the most confident. So even if you're like 60% believe in your idea, you cannot let that leak on your thing. And that's where having the names of like, I have worked with a library, because a lot of libraries are funded by the city, so technically you worked on the city. No different than when Matt was here. It's like, if you do the volunteering, you get to put Microsoft on your CV. So sometimes working to the library, you can do a little stuff for like a city festival. So if you do like, let's say like, I don't know what's the big festival here, but let's say like you do a festival, you technically did work with the city of Detroit because they had to give those funds. So now you're starting to have bigger and bigger clients without having to assert yourself. And that's one thing I think is the secret of grants, is that there's always like time before you do the grant to rev up. So like a lot of those travel grants, I'm like, okay, I don't think they're going to give it to me. So what I did for 1 week, I know there was like some like digital code stuff, like if you go in, if they like it, they get to exhibit. So I remember for 1 whole week, I got like 4 or 5 acceptance. And I did that right before the deadline of the grant. So my grant, my CV will look good for the grant. And they're like, wow, like, okay, yeah, your idea passed. But that's just because I was able to do those micro sacrifices. Like an hour there, an hour here won't hurt you, but it will aim, right? So like I said, like let's say like you need a big grant and you're feeling like a bit weak. Go to your local library, see if you can like get them on your list, because you probably won't even have to do a 40-hour week to have them on your CV. It could be like 1 hour, 2 hours, but that 1 hour, 2 hour, put it in on your CV for that one line does make a difference. And that has happened in some applications of mine. They're like, oh wow, you did a project with that? How did you even get that on? And so I tell them, oh yeah, it's like the process, but in reality, all I did was send an email. They're like, okay, we like it, let's do that. So it's a lot of those things that like, don't be afraid of using institutions that are near you, because most of the time, no one looks at them. And since no one looks at them, any value you would add, they are willing to like trade off. So that's why I tell people you can start small, because the underdog, with enough underdogs, you just grow up. So that's how I would say approach grants. Like, don't underestimate the community aspect, because yeah, sometimes they're not trying to rip you off. You can help each other and just build your CV up and up.
What's your favorite project that you've worked on?
Has to be one that I actually did out in Amsterdam recently and then got accredited, multi-sensory design. So I turned food into color into sound. And this was really because I was trying to find a way to do like some data sonification, data visualization, and also like app development. Because I was like in love with Twilio at the time, and like I'm like, oh, Python, Twilio, video. Let me try to do this big project. So then I'm like, oh wow, okay, maybe I want to use AI. So actually one of the first projects that I used AI. So I'm like, okay, how do I turn food into color into sound? So then I'm like, you know what? What if I made meals that all the colors were actually the ingredients. So one of the things I had in this thing was like almond crusted salmon. So like I really had the dish of it, looked at like the 40 variables that it has for color, and then I made a sound. And then I was like pitching it to someone, like, oh, like while they were eating, I would play the sounds, and they're like, oh wait, that's actually really cool that like while I'm eating, I can go in. And during this experience, what I did is also like how you would order food was not by the calories, but like by the saturation of the color or the vibrancy of the color, or like maybe you wanted a food that had more blue than red. And that was a play on, you know, when they say like when you eat a meal, you should eat different colors. So I was like literally playing with that. And then what I would do sometimes on the virtual ones, because this was an idea conceived during COVID, was like we would have like digital dining experiences. And what you would do is, what I would do is like play sounds. And then the sound, like if you liked a certain sound, you would get that like meal if you had it in your house. So like someone like, oh yeah, that's a cool meal. And I'm like, okay, you just had like collard greens. And they're like, oh, okay. So like playing on that. Something that's not traditional, but due to that, I was able to get a lot of like traction from that one, like because people found it so interesting. And then I had an AI version where like AI would try to help with like the world building. So yeah, that was one of my favorite ones because that like put me in another sphere. And in that one, I needed to work with people. So like I needed to get people like that would sing or people that can draw. I had to commission some stuff because that was like my first like project. Like I'm not doing that all alone. I want people around me to eat. And it's still a project ongoing. And I have done it in many ways. That project got me like my master's actually because I just continued with it there. It got me out of like some other random-ish. It actually also got in like an extra award. So like that's one of my projects that like building that world. And then the code is so reusable that I just like use it in all aspects.